how good is Indiana football, truly? Because they've outscored their opponents 202-37, but they have the 119th toughest strength of schedule, only ahead of Ohio State in the Big Ten, who has the 131st strength of schedule. Indiana, though, is the 34th remaining strength of schedule, so we'll figure out pretty quickly how legitimate this team is. The Hoosiers beat Charlotte in Week 4. In Week 3, they beat UCLA. I believe they beat Western Illinois in Week 2. And in Week 1, they beat Florida International. Those are their 4 opponents right now. I will say, transitive property here, so it doesn't mean much. I believe that LSU at this moment is better than Indiana. But Indiana beat UCLA 42-13 by a greater margin than UCLA lost to LSU by. LSU only beat UCLA 34-17. And at halftime, it was a 21-7 Indiana lead. At one point, it was 21-10 UCLA. That was the closest UCLA got to victory in the second half. And then Indiana scored a touchdown, making it 28-10. UCLA kicked another field goal to make it 28-13. And then Indiana scored 2 more touchdowns to make it 42-13. UCLA was tied with LSU 17-17 at half, and they were running and passing on the LSU Tigers. So, again, transitive property. UCLA was also at home against Indiana, on the road against LSU. Indiana has certainly been better coached and more efficient with their talent than LSU has. But if they were to match up tomorrow and play each other, I do not know. I don't know who would be better. And if I had a gun to my head, I'd side with LSU, because Brian Kelly's the more proven head coach than Curt Cignetti. And they have a lot more team talent, and their wide receivers are good. Their offensive line, really, at pass protection is good, and their defense has improved. But we're talking about mainly Indiana here. I just wanted to mention LSU as a team to compare them by, because they played a common opponent. And the fact that I'm doing that is great news for Curt Cignetti, because that means that I'm talking about Curt Cignetti's Indiana as a legitimate force to be reckoned with. Which means that what he said at Media Days, which was basically, you're all underestimating us, it's not funny, and we're going to prove you wrong, is slowly but surely boring out to be true. And is it? I don't know. I can't tell you the future. And what I can tell you right now is that Maryland by a mile is going to be the toughest team they've played all season long. That is this week, a game that I'm going to be making a preview and prediction video for, so subscribe and hit the bell if you're an Indiana or Maryland fan and you want to be notified when that drops. It's going to be a noon game on Big Ten Network, and that is going to be a measurement point for Indiana. Also for Maryland, too. Maryland, their schedule is like Indiana's. It is backloaded. They start off very easy, and then the good teams really start showing up, whether in SECU Stadium or Maryland has to travel to those teams. For Indiana, it's the same thing. They get Maryland in Week 5. They then in Week 6 get Northwestern. They have a bye in Week 7. Week 8, they host Nebraska, which could be a trap game for the Huskers. Maybe not, though, because if Indiana is undefeated entering that game with a 6-0 record, they'll probably be ranked and perhaps even favored to beat the Huskers after Nebraska lost. Washington comes to town in Week 9. Indiana travels to Michigan State in Week 10. They host Michigan in Week 11. They get a bye in Week 12, play at Ohio State in Week 13, and host Purdue in Week 14. Right now, how many teams would you favor to beat Indiana? How many teams would you pick to beat Indiana straight up, like neutral field? I would pick Indiana right now, just saying what I believe, to beat Maryland neutral field, Northwestern neutral field, Washington neutral field, Michigan State neutral field, Purdue neutral field. That's 5 teams that Indiana plays who I'd pick to beat neutral field. And all but Northwestern and MSU are at home. Northwestern is so bad that Indiana, I'm still very confident they'll destroy Northwestern. And Michigan State on the road could be challenging, but Indiana right now looks more efficient than Michigan State. Granted, they've played an easier strength of schedule. Let's assume all of those are wins. That's 5 plus 4, which equals 9. A 9-3 Indiana in year one. That would be mind-blowing. We're talking about Indiana potentially winning 8-9 games. If they just win 7, even though they started off 4-0, so they'd finish 3-4, 7-5 in year one would be impressive. Especially given that Indiana used to play in the Big Ten East, but the only team they don't face from the former Big Ten East is Rutgers and Penn State. They play Ohio State. They play Michigan. They play Michigan State. And they play Maryland. They play 4 out of their 6 former Big Ten East opponents. And, fortunately they don't play Penn State for them or Rutgers, who look pretty good right now, but at Ohio State's going to be very challenging. Michigan will be challenging. Nebraska's better than they were last season, and certainly better when Indiana last played them in 2022. Just, Indiana does not have an effortless road. Maybe they have an effortless road to 5 or 6 wins, but beyond that, they're going to be playing in some games that most Tom Allen teams would have lost to, most Kevin Wilson teams would have lost to. Oh, the fact that we're talking about Indiana here is 4-0, 1-0, who's just murdering their opponents. I mean, 202 points scored. They're averaging like 50.25 points per game. And they're only allowing about 7 points per game, a little under 7 points per game. It's insane. They have like a 6 touchdown point differential right now. That's impressive no matter how you spin it. No matter how you spin it. And you look at S&P Plus, you look at FPI, which I'm pulling up right now as we're talking. Indiana is rated as the 15th best team, in the country per FPI. Now, FPI is incredibly responsive, particularly to point margins. That's why, for example, Michigan went down radically in FPI after their game against Arkansas State, despite the fact that, they were never in a position to lose that game, because FPI doesn't really turn off when it comes to garbage time. It's also probably the reason why Clemson didn't climb as fast as Tennessee did after both beat NC State, because NC State scored a bunch of garbage time points, therefore narrowing that point margin, even though those points were fake. Indiana, for example, is beaten up on a bunch of scrubs, but because they've scored point after point after point, they've risen in FPI. It's why I like S&P Plus better. But even in S&P Plus, Indiana's the 30th best team in college football right now, and they did not start even close to that high. Not one bit. And they're viewed as 11.1 points superior to the average college football team in S&P Plus. And in FPI, they're viewed as 12.7 points superior to the average college football team. You look at just Big Ten teams, Indiana's viewed as the 5th best team in the Big Ten per FPI. You look at S&P Plus, Ohio State is at 2, Penn State's 8th, Oregon is 9th, Michigan is 15th, Iowa is 18th, Washington is 21st, USC is 24th. You look at, and then there you have it. USC, Washington, Iowa, Michigan, Oregon, Penn State, and Ohio State. Indiana is still viewed as a top half team in the Big Ten per S&P Plus, which is not nearly as reactive and more so looks at tempo. It's tempo adjusted, and it has a garbage time feature where after a certain amount of points are scored or the game's out of reach, it doesn't take the data as seriously anymore. And it's still very bullish on Indiana. So this team, I don't know how good they are, but I know, and I'm fairly confident that Indiana is a good football team this season. Curt Cignetti and Curtis Rourke and the team that the Hoosiers have this season, Justice Ellison, Donovan McCulley, You look at the fact that Indiana's only allowed 3 sacks this season. Elijah Surratt, who transferred in from James Madison, Omar Cooper, Miles Price. You got Zach Horton. Indiana right now has sacked their opponents 12 times, an average of 3 sacks per game, being led by Mikhail Kamara. And they have 4 interceptions and 5 forced fumbles. This is a team that's on the rise. They're very effective, efficient, well-coached, disciplined, and I'm happy to say that I picked them to go 6-6 and to a bowl game and finish over their 5.5 win total, because right now it looks pretty obvious they're going to go above their win total. And maybe Curt Cignetti is building something bigger at Indiana than anyone ever thought was possible. What do you all think about Indiana in the live chat? I'm very curious. Indiana and Illinois might be trouble for Michigan. Yeah. Yes. And we'll actually get to that in a few minutes. We'll get to that. Do not worry. Yeah, he is no nonsense. Got that many guys with him when he went to a new school, showed a lot. Brian Kelly teams are 0-5 in season openers in the last 5 years. Yeah. Oh, this is all stuff I'm reading from my chat, by the way. For those of you who are, listening to this when it's released as a recording or a video, whether on YouTube or Spotify, if you want to ask me a question and for me to give you a detailed answer, send a super chat and I'll get to it at the end of this video. I'll spend some dedicated time shouting out your name, thanking you for the super chat, and then answering your question, and we can have a conversation there. I do like Indiana's coach too. What he said at Big Ten Media Days kind of rubbed off on me a bit, because it didn't feel like, it felt maybe like, okay, this guy could be a psychopath and could be very arrogant. It also felt like he was very, it didn't totally come across that way. It felt like, okay, you might be insane, but there's at least some substance to it where I'll buy it, I guess, if that makes sense. And right now, I mean, when you're averaging 50 points per game and only allowing 7, again, I don't care who it's against. You may not even be top 25, but you very well could be. And the odds would actually say that if you continue to score those type of margins of victory, you definitely are top 25. And right now, Indiana in every power rating is like top 10 in efficiency or top 10 in expected points added or, points per play, that type of stuff. And if you took out priors, like prior wins and losses and recruiting from power ratings, Indiana would easily be top 15, if not top 10. Like from what I'm seeing in all of these different power ratings. It's insane. It's an insane time in college football. Thank you to my Patreon members for sponsoring this video and channel. I want to give a shout out to Crash2488 and Brasco Rascal for being Heisman Patreon members at $25 a month. If you sign up as a Heisman for 6 months at $25 a month, you will get signed free College Football with Sam merchandise of your choice delivered to you, plus access to my weekly college football picks, straight up and also against the spread. You get access to the picks, just not the signed merchandise if you're an All-American member at $10 a month. Thanks to Chris Slayton, kind of little OH, Ismar, Tyler Nye, and Chilton Cush for being All-American members. And if you just want your name featured at the end of every video with a shout-out, sign up as an all-conference member for $5 a month. Thank you, John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Steele, Austin Christmas, and Shanaisha Cockrell for being all-conference members. The links to my merchandise store and my Patreon page, both ways to support the channel, are in the description and also down below in the pinned comment. And I also encourage you to join my Discord via the link in the description and also in the pinned comment. Have a great day, guys, and I will see you all soon. Bye-bye.